Well, hello and welcome to everyone who's watching live with us right now and anyone who's going to be watching the recording at a later date. I'm Marina. I'm the head of Incendium's marketing side of things. And this is our latest episode in the Growth Accelerator series that we've been doing weekly on Thursdays. Today we have Troy Munson with us, which is super exciting. Troy is a serial founder and the current CEO of Dimmo, which lets you review SaaS products without entering into a sales cycle. So thank goodness. And as Troy has progressed through his career, he has accumulated quite a following. I noticed about 30,000 followers on LinkedIn alone. And with all the chatter online, especially among the entrepreneurial community and especially within SaaS about thought leadership and how to build a personal brand, we thought you were the perfect person to come on today and talk a little bit about that. So welcome.
I'm blushing. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Seriously. I know that Nate brought me on here and reached out to me, and he had you reach out to me. He's awesome. Been great to work with. So again, thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. No, Nate has also been on his own journey of kind of dabbling in the world of personal branding. So I'm sure he'll be tuning into the conversation a little bit later to get some of your thoughts and tips and tricks. But I would love to know off the bat, kind of when did you start down? When did you start intentionally, or maybe it happened organically, trying to work on your own personal brand, and what kind of sparked that if it was an intentional effort?
Yeah. So I don't think it was extremely intentional until about 2 years ago. So about 3 years ago, I was posting on LinkedIn, but it was nothing like thought leadership or
Yeah.
anything like that. It was really like, how can one thing I would do is I would connect with all of my prospects because I've been a long time sales rep. I would connect with all of my prospects. And then when they connected with me, I'd make a poll based on what company I was at. So for example, I was at a data analytics company. I would make a poll on LinkedIn, and it was always geared towards those people that were accepting my connection requests. And then when they would respond to the poll, I would set it up in a way where it's like they would have to answer to their pain points. So when they would respond to the poll, I would go and reach out to them and be like, "Hey, I've noticed that this is a pain point," because they literally voted for it. And so that's when I kind of started on LinkedIn. So it was probably that was about 3 years ago. And then I joined a company called Metadata, where they, as a company, had a really good brand on LinkedIn. And then a few people at that company had personal brands of, I don't know, 10,000 followers. And at the time, I was like, holy cow, that's so cool. Like they can make a
Yeah.
post. And then a lot of people are like, oh, I agree with this. This is awesome. And so when I was at Metadata, I realized that marketers are on LinkedIn a lot. And I thought, hey, if I just had a voice out there that helped marketers, so I'd share like a lot of use cases. We had a benchmark of tons of data. So I would just share like data points and stuff like that geared towards marketers. And then that just kind of started rolling into like, all right, well, that's working and I'm getting pipeline from that. So I might as well just start posting sales tips because I'm booking a lot of meetings and I'm doing like a lot of creative things. So yeah, I just randomly, I'd say about 2 years ago, started posting. It was intentional after I realized it was actually a guy named Mark Huber. He was the director of marketing at Metadata. I can't remember his exact role, but he was like my idol when I started posting. And so I was like, all right, I will get intentional about this. I'll post every single day. And of course, I missed some days. So I'd say about 2 years ago it was intentional. Before that, it was just to build some pipeline.
Yeah, that's great. Well, because I feel like so many people now are realizing what a good, pipeline generation tool it can be, and people are trying to maybe catch up. I'm curious, for people who got in on the game early, I wonder if there's a little bit of a difference where, we see it with cold outbound right now, where people are a little bit more skeptical when something comes across their email and it's, a little salesy or something. People react very differently to it now, versus how they did 3 years ago, which for our company is, a challenge to overcome. But I'm curious, do you have ideas, do you notice if there is a little bit of a difference in receptivity to people's thought leadership attempts online? And if so, do you think that there are things people can do in what they're posting or putting out there to maintain like a high level of authenticity and connect with people?
Yeah, so it absolutely has changed. I think that, call it 3 years ago, there was a few just really big creators, specifically on LinkedIn. I'm just only talking about LinkedIn here. And
Mhm.
so, specifically on LinkedIn, there was a few really big creators, and some of them were marketing, just sharing like how they're building their marketing orgs, but other were like creators of how to create content on LinkedIn. I the big guy's name, Justin Walsh, I believe. He pretty much made a course of, and he's like one of the most famous ones of how to make money on LinkedIn, essentially. And so I think that a lot of people started posting on LinkedIn with the mindset of I'm just going to go and milk an audience for money versus I'm going to just share what's working, what I'm doing today, like what's not working, all of that stuff. And so nowadays, I think even though LinkedIn is, there's still a lot of opportunity on LinkedIn. I think it's, if you're smart enough, I think you can read between the lines and know who's just blowing smoke and it's not
Mhm.
real.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would say it has definitely changed. A lot of people want to become a, I don't even consider myself a thought leader. I actually hate that word. I actually hate when my friends are like, "You're a LinkedIn influencer." I think it's so
Yeah.
awkward. I like hate attention on me. And so it's like very conflicting and ironic and
Mhm.
contradicting. But anywho, all that to say, yes, it is. It's not as receptive as it once was. But when it comes to being like building, I guess, an audience
Mhm.
on LinkedIn, and building genuine connections, I always say like build if you have a bigger plan. So for example, for me, I always knew I wanted to start my own company, and
Mhm.
the easiest way to do that is go out there and have people that just trust you. They know that you're just being your real self. You're not putting on like a persona, anything like that. So my whole plan when posting, I'm losing focus here. My whole plan when posting was just how do I post? How do I be myself and not like, wear a suit and tie,
Mhm.
act all professional. And then how do I just get people to follow me for who I am? And a lot of that just came down to like helping people. Um, and so I guess the tips to be authentic is like one, you're gonna sound stupid regardless. Like just post. A lot of people
Mhm.
are scared to know like what their colleagues might think, what their friends might think, and all that stuff. And all my friends would make fun of me in the beginning. Like it's just
Yeah.
part of it.
It's
Like
just how it goes.
are they your friends if they're not? And then all
Yeah,
my colleagues,
honestly.
right? All my colleagues would be like, "Oh, there's the LinkedIn guy." I'm like, "That's kinda weird," but, and this is when I had 0 followers. It was just like I was
Mhm.
just posting. Um, but there's that, and then another thing I think is, like, if you're trying to build genuine connections, like, when I moved to Raleigh 2 years ago, I'm now in Madison,
Mhm.
Wisconsin, but when I moved to Raleigh, my goal was, like, let me meet as many successful people as I can through
Yeah.
LinkedIn that are in Raleigh. So, like, the founder of Pindo, the founder of RepView, there's a few other people that I went and had coffee with that are in Raleigh because I was like, I wanna be in your shoes one day. So,
Mhm.
a lot of it's like, if you wanna build genuine connections, have a goal of who you wanna meet and make sure it's, like, somebody that you'd wanna grab lunch with. Because if it's not, then, like,
Yeah.
why build that
Why
connection?
bother?
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. You mentioned, like how, you should just be posting things that you would actually say, things that you actually, would naturally kind of put out there. I'm wondering what the balance is in your experience of, um, doing that, right? Like behaving online basically exactly as you would versus I imagine you start to see some trends, right? Of like this kind of post generates this much engagement, this kind of post doesn't, right? And I guess how do you strike that balance of going where the engagement is versus staying true to who you are and making sure that the brand you're building doesn't start to deviate?
One is don't this one's tough because a lot of people do wanna make side money on LinkedIn, and it is once you have, like, an audience of 5, 10,000 people and above, you can start making decent side gig money, so a lot of people will fall into this trap where companies will reach out to them and pay them 500 bucks a post, and they'll just start posting a bunch of stuff that they do
Mhm.
not care about, but they're doing it for the money.
Yeah.
Um, and I say all that to come back to the answer, which is, I think a lot of it came down to what was getting engagement and what wasn't. And then when I see a question over here, which was my best LinkedIn post, I don't know. I'd have to go look. But all that to say, I think it's like, okay, you find out something that catches engagement. So like for me lately, and I test and I try different things all the time. And this is
Mhm.
really dumb, but it's like for some reason cussing in the opener has been having way more engagement than not, and I don't know if it's, like, the emotion or the emphasis
Shock
on, like,
factor or
saying the word
something.
yeah, I don't know if it's
Yeah.
that, but that's been doing way better than anything, and, like, I'm not gonna continue to do it forever, but it's like,
Sure.
"Hey, people are eating this up right now, I'm gonna just kinda ride that wave." Um, but then the other thing is, like, once I think what's tough is people typically work at companies, and companies, they have to be careful with what they say online too. So like there's
Mhm.
another balance of like, how do I make sure I don't
Yeah.
piss I piss my last company off every day. I had so many HR conversations.
Oh, no.
So then I had to get really vague about what I was posting. But all that to say is I just looked at what drove engagement. So what did the
Mhm.
best? And for me, engagement does not mean impressions. A lot of
Mhm.
people look at their impressions. I look at like how many reactions I get
Sure.
because I don't care if they like scrolled past it. I care if they actually liked it, they engaged with it.
Mhm.
And then I would just take that same format and then repeat it with another story. And I have like a whole I actually have a post that says exactly how I come up with my content ideas on LinkedIn. So I have like a whole
Yeah.
spiel of like this is how to create a lot of content when you don't
Mhm.
think that you have a lot of content to write about. Um, so yeah, I think it's you find what works and then you continue to iterate on that same format, that same structure, that same, like you said, shock factor. At
Mhm.
the end of the day, like if your hook is good, people will read.
Yeah.
So for me, especially now that I'm running my own thing, it's kind of nice because I
Mhm.
don't have to have a balance between let's be
Yeah.
semi-professional, let's just be
Right.
myself. But I think there's ways around it, and it's just like
Mhm.
you just have it's hard to explain the ways around it, especially when you're at a company. You just have to like figure it
Yeah.
out, like be yourself, kind of poke the bear a little bit, see what you can get away with, and then pull back if you're getting
Yeah,
in trouble.
just
So
the right balance of,
yeah,
ask for forgiveness, not permission.
yeah,
It honestly doesn't sound too similar to just, because I imagine a lot of the people that are watching this are in our neck of the woods tend to be, startup founders and things like that. It honestly doesn't sound too much different than the, like, product development stage, right? Where you're kinda going off of, what are the early stage customers, like, enjoying? What are they
yep,
disliking? Like, and then, not completely building yourself into an entirely different company, but kinda staying within the realm of, like, this is who we are, but, like, let's go in the direction of, what our customers are liking.
yeah. It literally is product development, but it's like maybe we can create a category here about brand development. It's like the same thing. It's
Yeah.
what are people liking? What are they not liking? And also, one thing that's important to note is if you make a bad post, nobody reads bad posts because it doesn't catch the
Go
algorithm.
anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like,
Yeah.
who cares? Nobody's gonna see it anyway, so don't worry if your post is
Yeah.
bad. And I've had so many bad posts. So yeah.
I would love for you to say a little bit more though. You referenced that you have like like tips or tricks or whatever for how to help people who don't feel like they have a lot to post more. You don't necessarily have to give everything away, but I'm curious because one of the top things we hear from people, and even within our own company, as like Nate's tried to build a little bit more of a presence online, it is like a real concern that people express off the bat, which is like, I don't have that much to say, 4 or 5 times a week, and like, what do I
Yeah.
do? Where do I come up with stuff?
Yeah, so there's one thing. So I've made in the last 2 years, I've made over 1,000 posts. I post twice a day,
Wow.
every day, just about almost, and it's
Mhm.
exhausting. And I've been burnt out like 4 to 5 times, and I've had to like
Yeah.
take breaks from LinkedIn. But um, one thing that you'll notice is a lot of people recycle posts, and that's
Mhm.
totally normal. I do it all the time. Like if my brain's not braining and I have to go and
Mhm.
figure out like which post that did I make 9 months ago
Yeah.
that performed really well, let me just rewrite it, but change the hook or change a little bit of what it says inside or update it just a tad. Because at the
Mhm.
end of the day, 9 months ago, like only those people saw it. So many more people are going to see it this time around, or more
Yeah.
unique people will see it. But to think about post, I think of it in like so I think of it kind of like in this hierarchy where it's you have like things that you just do throughout life. So for example, I started LinkedIn just being a sales rep, talking
Mhm.
about what works. So there was a few things that I knew I could talk about. I could talk about prospecting, I could talk about closing deals, I could talk about entrepreneurship because I was able to build a couple side gigs that sold. I could talk about building on LinkedIn, and then I've helped several people land job interviews. So like those are things that I can talk about to an extent, right? So the first thing is
Mhm.
like, what are a few topics that you can talk about to a specific extent? Like you really, whatever you do. And I think even if you're a starting sales rep or a starting founder, like there's probably something you've done in a past life or even that you're doing now, like building in public is huge. But that's what I first do. So like, for example, if prospecting is something that I can talk about, I then open the box there and I'm like, okay, well, what about prospecting? I've done
Mhm.
LinkedIn prospecting, I've done video prospecting, I've done cold emails, I've done cold calls, and I've done like in-person drop-offs that have all worked for booking net new meetings. So now I have like 4 or 5 different pillars from just prospecting. And I do the same thing with
Mhm.
the other ones. So closing deals, there's deals that I could talk about, etc. So each of those you would have like 4 or 5 different pillars. Then from there, it's like, okay, cool. Now I have LinkedIn prospecting, video prospecting, cold emails, cold calls, etc. So, what about LinkedIn prospecting? Are there any meetings that I've booked on LinkedIn recently? Yes, there probably is, especially if you're doing this every day. So, you're like, hey, if you have
Mhm.
like 4 meetings that you've booked in the last month, now you can talk about 4 different ways that you booked a meeting on LinkedIn, all completely different stories.
Yeah.
And then those stories, like now you have you're prospecting, you've got 4 different styles of prospecting. Now you have 4 different stories for just one of those. And then you do that for each category and each subcategory, I guess you can call them.
Mhm.
And then just break it down all the way until you have like that personal story for each one, because that is definitely what helps more than anything. I used to post like a lot of how-to type posts that did okay.
Mhm.
But the second that I switched over to posting like how I did it, how I was able to book this meeting or how I was able to generate this revenue, that's when things started to pop off for me a little bit because people wanted to
Yeah.
hear personal stories versus just like generic canned how-tos
Right.
that they can find on Google or ChatGPT.
Right, which makes sense, right? Like, if the entire point is building kind of a brand around yourself, like, yeah, you can go to, ChatGPT for one thing to kinda get tips and tricks on that kind of stuff, but, yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's a helpful takeaway to it's a subtle shift that can make a big difference.
Yeah.
I do, one of the other common I'll call it an objection, but also just, like, one of the main reasons for burnout, and you mentioned it yourself, is people who are in this space trying to, create their own personal brand, like, they've got a lot of stuff, like, other stuff going on professionally, personally. What have you found helpful for, getting yourself to, like, stick with a certain rhythm or even just, like, justifying carving some time out during your day to be able to post, in your case, twice a day? Most people, I'm assuming, when they're starting, are probably gonna be looking at a few times a week.
Yeah, so one thing is just posting won't get you far. You have to engage with people. So again, I kind of mentioned this in the beginning, which is have like a big picture. Like, why are you building a brand? If you're just building a brand to just build a brand, I don't know how to help you, to be honest. But if you're building a brand because you want to monetize your audience, there's many like, okay, well, what's that audience? Is it marketers? Is it
Mhm,
sales reps? Is it founders, etc.? Or is it because you know that you're building something or is having a side gig, you want to go full time? You're like, let me just get people to like be fans of me or trust me, whatever it is. So
mhm,
it all depends on what your end goal is. But I say that because posting's not going to get you anywhere. It's going to be like that engagement aspect. So when I first started, oh, it was draining. I mean, my wife hated it. I hated it. And even I still it's still draining. It's still like annoying to keep up with it, but it's
mhm,
something that has just been so successful in my life that I continue to do it. So a lot of engagement. So if you're targeting marketers, it's like, okay, great. Go send those connection requests, go comment on their posts. Like don't pitch them or anything. Like just build genuine connections. So go comment on their posts, like meaningful comments, tag them in things that they might like, have conversations with them in the DMs, like do
mhm,
that every single day, which is I have like a little sheet and I don't know if there's anywhere if people want this. I'm not sure who's here, but I can send it all out. But it's like I usually like back in the day, I would make 25 comments every single day. I would have 25 different connections and I would have 2 posts every day. Anyways, um, you do that every single day and then you'll burn out. It's just how it
yeah,
is. Like I would be on my couch. My son he was probably like 6 months at the time when I started, or maybe even younger. He would just be laying on me and I'd be on my phone scrolling to respond to a comment or to, and that's another thing. You want to respond to every comment on your post
mhm,
up until you can't. I'm getting bad at that. I need to do better. Um, I try, but yeah, I would just literally sit there at dinner and just be scrolling on LinkedIn and commenting. Like there was definitely like personal sacrifices that I had to make to like
mhm,
get there. Not everybody needs to do that, but I was like, let me
yeah,
fast track it. And so yeah, if you, it's one of those platforms where the more time you put into it, the more you'll get out of it. So just do
yeah,
it until it's like unhealthy for you, to be honest.
yeah.
And I tell people I never avoid burnout. I run into it and then I take a break. Like I get burnt out and then I'm like, all right, let me back off.
Um, oh, something you said, it sparked a question, I'm trying to remember it. Um, Oh, I guess, do you notice like responding to all the people that are commenting or engaging in your with your own content in one way is going to be fundamental to building an audience, but what about engaging with other people's posts? Like how much did you go outside of your own content and like try to, I guess, increase your visibility elsewhere?
Every day, all day. Like that's so I would be doing my work and then I'm like any free time sitting down having lunch, if I was tired of prospecting for a bit or if I just jumped off of a call, it was like I would jump in and just go to my feed and then I would just comment on people's posts that like were somewhat relevant in the like people
Mhm.
I'd want to get in front of. I wouldn't go comment on like an IT administrator and I have no planned with IT
Yeah,
admins, nothing against them, but
sure.
that just
Yeah,
wasn't where I wanted to spend my time. So yeah, it would honestly be like, and that's what I'm saying is like when I'd be on the couch, I would just be commenting on other people's posts, like
yeah.
just whatever. And so that was the most
Mhm,
time consuming part was the comments on
mhm.
other posts.
Yeah. This is a little bit philosophical, but like it's not a light amount of work. It sounds like to dive into this world. So, like, are you of the belief that if you are a leader in any capacity, like especially in like the B2B SaaS world or something, like you should be doing this, and if you're not, you're like behind? Or are you more of the mindset that like if it fits you, if you like again, you've talked a lot about having goals attached to like why you would do this, but what's your take on that kind of broader question?
I don't think it's a necessity. I think especially if you're so I just got off of a call because somebody was asking about personal branding. This
Mhm.
was Monday of this week, and they sell to like supply chain and logistics. It's a founder of a supply chain and logistics company, and like their
Yeah.
audience isn't on LinkedIn. So it's like
No.
it wouldn't really help you that much.
Mhm.
If your audience is live on LinkedIn or if your audience on Reddit, if your audience is on Twitter, like
Yeah.
I do think that it is absolutely a competitive advantage, especially if you're like brand new, just
Yeah.
starting. I think it's a competitive advantage to have that audience to start posting a lot and start engaging a lot. But I also like I see so many successful companies where the founder and even startups where the founders have zero brand. They're just kind of like
Mhm.
doing guerrilla marketing, guerrilla sales, like just getting through it.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a necessity, but I do think it's a competitive advantage, especially really early off. And I'm going to segue that answer into
Mhm.
Lenny's question saying, can you measure your presence on LinkedIn versus engagement with your company? Because I think this answer goes in with that question.
Mhm.
Yes. So, for example, we have not spent a dollar on marketing at all. We've had 150,000 users to our site. We're a SaaS
Wow.
demo marketplace, so you can go and
Sure.
watch SaaS demos without jumping into a sales cycle. So we've had over
Mhm.
800 companies request to be on our site. We have almost 300 companies on the site today. All of
Wow.
that's just done through me and my co-founder posting on LinkedIn. Like that's it. We
It's
have
great.
not done any other marketing. So
Yeah.
I don't the way I measure success is how much is our traffic growing on our site. That's like really like the main
Mhm.
thing. Revenue kind of comes in line with traffic. So, so kind of, I can kind of measure my LinkedIn audience versus engagement because everything we've
Yeah.
done is all through my LinkedIn audience.
Wow. That's great. And it does look like we're getting some comments or I guess questions in the comment section. So someone else, Cameron, said commenting on other people's posts can be challenging. Sometimes it's hard to find the words other than a generic comment. What has your experience been and how have you found success?
Let's see. Yeah. I did a lot of generic comments, but I tried not to. Like
Mhm.
it's almost like if you're in sales or familiar with sales, it's like not every single outreach that you do to a prospect will be personalized and relevant and like be in a bow tie and like it's just impossible.
Yeah.
So every single I would say like if they're in your ICP of what you're trying to build. So if you're a founder selling Martech software, I would
Mhm.
honestly just comment on every single marketer. Just be like, this is great or whatever. You don't always have to have like this really well thought out response. You just don't, especially if you're just kind of like like let's just say you're at a traffic light or you're at lunch or whatever, sitting on your couch, like and you're trying to fly through comments, like just do it somewhat generic, but don't make it look like AI is the only thing that I say is because
Yeah.
AI comments are so obnoxious and they're disgusting. So
I know anytime I get any communication that says delve in it, I'm like, immediate no.
yeah. And
That
then
word is
if they tag you and they're like Troy exclamation mark, love this post. I'm like, all right, you're blocked.
nice.
I don't block
Right.
people, but yeah.
Um, I guess probably wrapping up our questions, but one other thing that's probably helpful for people to know is there anything glaringly um, like obvious to you now that if you could go back to 2 years ago, but even when you first started organically doing some of this, that you would do differently, knowing what you know now?
Um, that's a tough question. So the short answer is no. And the reason for that is like the algorithm changes so much. So I used to like chase, I don't know why this keeps
Mhm.
falling out of focus, but I used to chase the algorithm so
Mhm.
much. And I tried my hardest, like just be like LinkedIn's favorite like poster child when it comes to the algorithm. And I
Mhm.
don't do that anymore. At this point, I'm just like, hey, what's getting me engagement? Let me repeat that. So I would say, if anything, like the biggest thing is make sure that okay, so you're sending these connection requests every day, you see your connections going up. And again, make sure that they're like good. You don't just want to have like big numbers because you connected
Mhm.
with a lot of people. That doesn't help. Um, and so as these go up, I would say like the biggest thing is one, my writing has gotten so much more clear and better, but that's over the
Mhm.
time of 1,000 posts.
Yeah.
And so what I've noticed is like you really want, well, one, you want people to have to click that see more button for some reason.
Mhm.
Again, don't chase the algorithm, but that's like one thing that LinkedIn favors is if somebody clicks see more, then that means you're engaging with it, which keeps people on the site. So
Mhm.
that I always make sure that I do is like you want to set up your post to where it's like a bombshell. So the way LinkedIn works is there's like three lines and then a see more. So I usually do like one line, a space,
Mhm.
and then another line, and like it'll say something like here's how, or here's how I did it, or this is what I think. And then they have to hit see more to see the rest of the post. It's like this is kind of like the algorithm thing, but it really does help if you can get them to click see more. So like create a very shocking, controversial,
Mhm.
um, curious hook.
Yeah.
Have people click that see more button and then have the rest of your stuff. And then the other thing is like paragraphs. Nobody reads paragraphs. LinkedIn is like a skimming platform. So you want things to be like short, digestible sentences. Like look at
Mhm.
any of my posts. It's like digestible sentences or even broken up to like bullet points because that's how people read on LinkedIn is it's not a
Mhm.
book. It's a post. So yeah.
That's great. And then I think we have about a minute or two left, but I saw Zachary dropped another comment in the chat. So he says repurposing content is so major. Popular to say content is king, but you don't have to beat your head against the wall when you have ideas that have resonated in the past. Have you reposted something lately with a new perspective? We touched on that a little bit, but
Mhm.
we can round out on that.
Yeah, I used to say, and I kind of agree with this, but I think that a lot of times I would make posts that talks in like absolutes, like this is what I
Mhm.
think across the board. I used to make posts about, and I repurposed a post about this, Zachary. So I used to make posts about how like you need to have pricing on your website. Like it's stupid to
Mhm.
not have pricing on your website. But then I went to a larger company where they had like 35 products and it would make 0 sense to have pricing on their website. So
Yeah.
then I shift my thinking of like, no, you don't want pricing on your website unless you're like a startup and you can use that to your competitive advantage because a lot of people that shop these days do just want to go see the pricing before they even
Yeah.
start conversations. But so that was like one thing. But yeah, I'm sure I can find many examples. Um, like me flipping from like cold emailing to
Mhm.
like now I think cold calling is a lot more efficient than cold emailing. And
Mhm.
so yeah, absolutely. Times change, the market changes. And so you just kind of have to like stay up to date and keep your finger on the pulse of what's going on.
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely.
Well, I imagine there's even just something refreshing too about being able to like publicly say, like, this is what I used to believe. Here's what, I've noticed is different now, or my thoughts on it have changed, or, anything to
Yeah.
that effect.
Yeah. Oh
Great.
yeah,
Well, this has
absolutely.
been a great conversation, Troy. So thank you so much for coming on. I'm sure there's a lot more questions that viewers could watch or myself, but really great intro thoughts. And I appreciate you having here. So thanks again for being a guest on our Growth Accelerator. And for anyone watching, you can come back next Thursday. We'll have Bennett Moore from West Coast, who's going to be talking about his surprising experiences with cold outbound and how it has generated a lot less hate and more gratefulness than he expected. So tune in next week. But again, Troy, thank you so much for coming on.
Of course. Thanks for having me.